Michael, the Mercedes guy, again, and we're working on a low miles 123 sedan, a 240D, that only has 101,000 miles. And this is a car on another video or two, and the paint is very oxidized. Now, if it was still kind of shiny, I could just buff it a little bit. But this amount of oxidation, it helps to have these trims off, and even the door handles off, and the headlight doors off, and the turn signals off, and so on, because if you polish this, there's always residue that ends up right in here, and then you got to use a brush to try to get it all, and you never really get it all. And what happens is, since this black rubber plastic material is porous, there will be spots of white compound in there. So, the way you pull these trims off, this is a Bondo mixing tool, and I've ground it so that it's very thin here, thicker here. And you work it underneath the trim, and then bring it up to, pull it up to the fastener, and then give it a pop. And the reason you want to pull it up to the fastener is, for one, to keep from bending the trim, but also, if you were to pop it off in this position, you would pop out the male fastener out of the trim, and that's a bit of a trouble to get those back in. So what you do, you run this up to that fastener, pop it off. And there you have it. And you notice that the trim is nice and straight. Now, if you do bend this trim, you can straighten it. But I advise using a junk piece of trim to test yourself. You can very carefully put a little pressure on, but you can very easily bend it so that it distorts the shiny part, and you don't want to do that. So that's how you pull these trims. Now, back at the back of a 123, these door trims, same process, same process. The rear trim is a little bit tricky. Because there is a hidden screw. And I'll point out where it is. On each side, there is a screw right here. It's actually has a hex head on it, an 8mm, sometimes they're 7mm head, right there. So that holds the trim on over here. And you want to take that fastener out first before you start popping the trim, or you'll bend the trim right here. This trim which on this car it's damaged over here, so I'm replacing it anyway, but I'm also removing it. And as you can see, every single fastener is a self-tapping screw. And that's easily accessible. It's right under this edge right here. All these screws right along here. So here's that side trim removed from the car, and what often happens, almost all the time, some of these red buttons, like this, come off of the car. In fact, almost every one. This is what we want to have with this, just the male part. You cannot reinstall this with the red buttons on and have any success. You must put the red buttons on the car, and then you can pop in the side trim. So, it helps to have two people. I'm doing this as a single person here to show how it's done if you don't have a helper. So we want to protect that side trim. Just a little bit of tension on that, not much, you got to be careful. Now I have a 2-vise setup. If you only have one vise, you can turn it and put some blocks of wood to support the other part. Then you're going to have to pop these buttons off, and without a helper to put their hand above, which is ideal, they're going to go into orbit. Sometimes you can, aha! So we got that one off. So you take them all off, the same process. If you're by yourself, sometimes what helps to keep them from going into orbit and losing them if you don't have extras is to have a rag you can put on top once you get your screwdrivers under here. Put a rag on top, and then it won't go into orbit. Aha. Now I haven't buffed the car out yet, but I want to complete this process of the side trim, and so you put the red buttons back in the holes, and you want to just carefully tap them in. There is a little slot, and that slot has to be into the sheet metal of the fender, like so. You want it all the way in, not sticking out like that. There we go. Okay, now next process is to make sure that all of these male ends are properly oriented to the holes. And they are, luckily. They can move easily. to be in the right place. Now you start at one end. Now, this is where it can get tricky, because if you pound on this too hard, you can put a dent in this. So, again, it's nice to have a helper to hold the hammer like this to the inner side so that the fender's not springing. There we go. And that baby will not come off.